Hello, my dear students. I'm your host and, of course, your favorite science teacher. Today, we are unlocking the exact concepts you need to score full marks on your biology exam. We are mastering biological respiration. So pay full attention, sit up straight, and by the end of this explainer, these concepts will be locked in your memory forever. Let's begin.
All right, let's quickly look at our agenda for today. 1. The energy secret. 2. Breathing versus respiration. 3. Respiration in the animal kingdom. And 4. The human respiratory journey.
Section 1. The energy secret. Unlocking the power of cells. Okay, I want you to memorize this definition exactly, all right? Respiration is the process of releasing energy from the breakdown of food. Think of it like this. Inside your cells, oxygen acts like a tiny key. It breaks down the food you eat to literally unlock energy. But, this essential chemical reaction produces a toxic byproduct, carbon dioxide, which absolutely must be exhaled from the body.
Moving on to Section 2, Breathing versus Respiration, the ultimate exam trap. Now, listen carefully to me because this is a guaranteed exam question. Please do not lose marks here. Breathing, it's merely a physical process. It happens outside the cells, it's simply the exchange of gases, and crucially, zero energy is released. None. Respiration, on the other hand, is a chemical process happening perfectly inside the cells. It uses catalysts to break down food, and boom, that is where your actual energy is released.
Section 3. Respiration in the animal kingdom. How different creatures breathe.
We land animals? Well, we're pretty lucky. We breathe air that is 21% oxygen. But aquatic animals face a much tougher environment. Water holds only a tiny, 0.5% of oxygen and normal temperatures. Because of this massive difference, aquatic creatures have to work incredibly hard, using highly specialized organs just to extract enough oxygen to survive.
All right, take a mental snapshot right now for your match the following exam questions. Ready? Earthworms and leeches use their moist, slimy skin. Insects, like ants, use spiracles, which are basically little holes that send air through tracheal tubes. Mammals, like horses and, us humans, we use sac-like spongy lungs. And the incredible frog? It adapts to both environments. It uses its moist skin in the water and its lungs on land.
So this brings us to a classic textbook question. It really tests your true understanding. Why do fish die when taken out of water? Think about it. Even with 21% oxygen in the air, a fish cannot survive. Let's uncover why. The answer lies entirely in their gills. You see, gills are slit-like organs made of thread-like filaments, and they are richly supplied with tiny blood vessels called capillaries. These capillaries are perfectly designed to absorb that rare oxygen directly from flowing water. But here's the catch. This delicate system completely collapses in dry air. Without water flowing through to keep the filaments separated, they just cannot absorb oxygen, and sadly, the fish suffocates. Oh, and we definitely can't forget the simplest creatures, unicellular organisms. Being just a single cell, they don't need complex organs at all. They exchange gases directly through their cell membrane via a super simple process called diffusion. It's direct, it's simple, and it's highly effective. Section 4. The human respiratory journey, a guided tour. Now, let's trace the exact path of oxygen inside the human thorax. Just beneath your protective rib cage is a powerful, dome-shaped muscle called the diaphragm. Mark my words, students, its movement is the absolute key. When the diaphragm contracts, oxygen-rich air is pulled actively into your lungs. And when it relaxes, that toxic carbon dioxide is pushed right back out. It's really that simple. Contract to inhale, relax to exhale.
Okay, I want you to memorize these exact 6 steps of the air's journey for your exam. First, the nostrils, where hair and mucus bravely trap dust. Second, the larynx. Third, down the trachea, or windpipe, which is supported by cartilage rings. Fourth, it branches into 2 bronchi. Fifth, into narrower tubes called bronchioles. And sixth, finally reaching tiny airbags called alveoli.
The alveoli are the final destination. This is where the real magic happens, guys. These tiny airbags act as the exchange point with your blood. Oxygen is absorbed right in, and the toxic carbon dioxide is dropped off to retrace that exact same journey in reverse, all the way back out of your nose.
Remember my golden rule. Every single physical breath you take fuels the magnificent chemical reaction of respiration that literally powers your life. I highly encourage you to listen to this explainer again and again anytime you need a refresher until you know every single detail by heart. You are going to completely ace that exam. But before you go, I want to leave you with this thought. If every single breath fuels millions of tiny chemical fires inside your cells, just how much microscopic energy was released in your entire body during the few minutes it took to listen to this explainer? Keep studying hard, and I will see you at the top of the class.
Hello, my dear 7th Standard Science students. Welcome to our class. I am your teacher for today, and I am absolutely thrilled to have you here with me. Together, we are going to completely master the mechanisms of biological respiration. I know you have your big exams coming up, so we're going to break down every single detail from your textbook so that you understand it perfectly, remember it easily, and score top marks. Concept clear? Excellent. Let's begin.
Here is our syllabus for today's explainer. We'll be covering the breathing mechanism, exchange of gases, plant and aquatic respiration, heat release during respiration, and finally, aerobic versus anaerobic respiration.
Starting right off with Section 1, the breathing mechanism.
Okay, let's jump straight into this first topic to understand exactly how our bodies pull air in and push it out. We usually prove this mechanism using the classic bell jar activity. Picture this in your mind. You take a glass bell jar and tie a flexible rubber sheet to the open bottom. This rubber sheet acts just like your diaphragm. Inside the jar, we have straws connected to a balloon, and that balloon, well, that represents your lungs. We cork the top of the jar very tightly so absolutely no outside air can sneak in, except directly through that straw. Now think about this. What happens when we pull that rubber sheet down and then push it back up?
It brilliantly shows exactly what is going on in your own chest right now. Pulling the rubber sheet down increases the empty cavity space inside the jar. Because there's suddenly more space, air rushes in through the straw to fill it, naturally inflating the balloon. This is precisely what happens during inhalation. Your diaphragm contracts, moves down, and air just rushes into your lungs. On the flip side, when you push that rubber sheet up, the cavity gets smaller, collapsing the balloon. This perfectly mirrors exhalation, where your diaphragm relaxes, moves up, and forces the air right out of your lungs.
Moving on to Section 2, exchange of gases.
See, breathing on the outside is just step 1. What actually happens deep inside your body? Please, get your pens ready and write this exact sequence down, because examiners love to ask this. The oxygen-rich air enters through your nose, passes the larynx, and travels down the trachea. From the trachea, it moves into the bronchus, then branches out into tiny, smaller tubes called bronchioles, until it finally reaches these tiny little air sacs called alveoli. Here in the alveoli, the air is separated from your blood by a very, very thin membrane. This is where the actual magic of gas exchange takes place. Oxygen diffuses right into the blood, and the waste carbon dioxide diffuses out.
Now, you absolutely must know this term for your exam: oxyhemoglobin. When that fresh oxygen crosses the thin membrane into your blood, it grabs onto a special protein called hemoglobin, forming oxyhemoglobin. The pulmonary vein then returns this freshly oxygenated blood to your heart so it can be powerfully pumped to every single cell in your entire body. Why? Because your cells literally need that oxygen to break down your food.
So, the crucial point is this chemical equation. Mark it as highly important in your notes. When oxyhemoglobin reaches your cells, it releases the oxygen. That oxygen is then used to break down the food you ate, specifically sugar or glucose. This breakdown generates the vital energy you need to study, to play, to just live. Along with that pure energy, this process creates carbon dioxide, water, and heat as byproducts.
Now, how do we prove to the examiners that the air we breathe out is actually packed with that leftover carbon dioxide? Simple. We use the lime water test. You just take 2 disposable glasses filled with lime water. Let normal room air bubble into the first one, and then you blow your own exhaled air through a straw into the second one. Carbon dioxide has this unique chemical property. It turns lime water milky. You will easily observe that the first glass becomes only slightly milky, but the second glass, the one you blew into, turns very, very milky. This undeniably proves to anyone that our exhaled air contains high levels of carbon dioxide.
All right, Section 3, plant and aquatic respiration.
Now that we know exactly how humans breathe, let's explore plants. Obviously, plants don't have noses, right? So they respire through tiny microscopic holes called stomata, mostly found hidden on the underside of their leaves. These stomata trap air so gases can be exchanged. But what's really, really important to observe here is that it is not just the leaves that need to breathe. Even plant roots, buried deep down in the dark soil, require oxygen to survive and take up vital minerals. This is exactly why our hardworking farmers plow and till the soil.
They do it to create tiny little air spaces around the soil particles so the plant roots can respire properly. Concept clear?
Pay very close attention here, my dear students. Please, do not make this common exam mistake. Sometimes students confuse respiration with photosynthesis. Remember this golden rule. Respiration is the breaking down of food for energy, and it occurs continuously, day and night, non-stop. Photosynthesis is the making of food, and it happens only during the day in the presence of bright sunlight. Never mix the two up.
If an examiner asks you to formally prove that plants respire through their stomata, you describe the petroleum jelly experiment. You take a nice leafy plant that has been sitting in the dark for a few days. This stops the photosynthesis. Then you coat the underside of a couple of its leaves with thick petroleum jelly. You place the whole plant on a sunny windowsill. Over the next week, you will observe that only those specific coated leaves begin to wither and die. By coating the stomata with jelly, we completely block the air from entering. The leaves dying proves beyond any doubt that plants must respire to survive.
So, if air is an absolute, non-negotiable requirement for respiration, how do creatures surviving entirely underwater manage it? There's no open air for a bell jar or stomata down there in a lake.
Write these adaptation points down carefully. Aquatic life beautifully adapts by utilizing dissolved oxygen. This oxygen gets into the water directly from the atmosphere above and also from underwater plants doing their own photosynthesis. Aquatic animals extract this hidden, dissolved oxygen using specialized organs like gills, or, remarkably, they just breathe right through their wet skins. Aquatic plants are even more direct. They exchange gases straight through the wet surfaces of their leaves, stems, and roots.
Let's look at Section 4, Heat Release During Respiration. So we know energy, carbon dioxide, and water are produced during respiration. But let's look at a truly brilliant experiment to prove that it also releases heat. We soak a big batch of seeds for 24 hours. We take half of them, boil them to kill them, and wash them with dilute formalin or carbolic acid just so they don't decay. These dead seeds go into flask 2. The other half are kept totally alive and germinating. They go straight into flask 1. We plug both flasks tightly with cotton and insert a thermometer into each. After just a few hours, the thermometer reading in flask 1 will be visibly higher. This perfectly demonstrates to anyone that living, respiring seeds give out measurable heat, unlike the killed ones.
And finally, Section 5, Aerobic versus Anaerobic Respiration.
This is a guaranteed exam topic, so focus completely. First is aerobic respiration, which always happens in the presence of oxygen. Sometimes students compare it to burning or combustion because, well, both use oxygen and both release energy. But if you look at the comparison table on your screen, you'll see massive differences. Unlike combustion, which releases energy suddenly as wasteful heat and blinding light, aerobic respiration releases its energy gradually. And more importantly, it stores that energy incredibly efficiently inside the body as ATP. These are energy-rich molecules your body can tap into whenever it needs a quick boost. On the flip side, we have anaerobic respiration. If you ever get confused by this big name during your test, just remember a simple trick. The prefix "an" simply means without, making it the process of respiration that occurs entirely without oxygen. Because there is zero oxygen available here, the chemical formula completely changes. Look at this. Instead of sugar breaking down into water, the sugar breaks down into energy, carbon dioxide, and a completely new organic compound called ethyl alcohol.
Now, you might wonder, where does this even happen? Well, you'll actually feel this happening in your very own muscle cells. When you do heavy exercise, play sports, or run really fast, your body simply cannot supply oxygen to your leg muscles quickly enough, so your muscles temporarily switch to anaerobic respiration to get that quick burst of energy. We humans can only do this for very short periods. However, certain microorganisms like yeast, bacteria, and fungi rely on this anaerobic process constantly. It's literally the only way they know how to breathe. And with that, my dear students, we have covered the entire syllabus for this topic. You now know every critical mechanism, formula, and experiment of this chapter. You are thoroughly prepared to ace this. Please, I encourage you to listen to my teachings in this explainer anytime you need a quick refresher, again and again before your big test. Repetition is the ultimate key to a perfect memory.
But before you close your books and go play, I want to challenge you to think about this one last thing. If our human muscle cells can briefly survive and create energy without oxygen during heavy exercise, what would ultimately happen to our bodies if we were forced to rely purely on anaerobic respiration forever? Think about those toxic chemical byproducts we just discussed. Ponder on that study hard, and I will see you in our next explainer.
Hello there, my dear students. Come on, get those notebooks ready, sit up nice and straight, and let's settle in. I am your teacher for today's explainer, and we're going to make the absolute fundamentals of biological respiration crystal clear for you. By the end of this session, you are going to be 100% ready to score full marks in your 7th standard science exams on this topic. Let's dive right in, shall we? Okay, so here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll cover the basics of breathing and respiration, move on to the human respiratory system, look at how other organisms respire, tackle aerobic versus anaerobic respiration, and finally end with a really cool experiment proving oxygen is essential. All right, let's hit section 1, basics of breathing and respiration. Now I need you to lock this into your memory and maybe highlight it in your books. Respiration is, at its core, a chemical process. It's an entire series of chemical reactions where food molecules, things like glucose, are broken down by enzymes. And why? To release energy, carbon dioxide, and water. Listen carefully. If you get a short answer question on this in the exam, writing the word chemical is your absolute key to securing those full marks. Now let's compare that to breathing, because students mix this up all the time. Breathing is not chemical. It is purely a physical process. It's just inhalation, which is taking in that nice oxygen-rich air, and exhalation, giving out the carbon dioxide. Essentially, breathing is just the physical, mechanical step that brings in the air so that the grand chemical process of respiration can actually happen inside your cells. Make sense? Moving right along to section 2, the human respiratory system. Let's test your knowledge right off the bat with a quick little riddle. These exact clues appear as objective questions all the time, so pay attention. I am known as the chest cavity. I protect the lungs. I am a dome-shaped muscle pumping air. Have you guessed who I am? Let's see if you got them right. The chest cavity is scientifically called the thorax. The bony structure that protects your delicate lungs, that's the rib cage. The windpipe, which is made up of these tough little cartilage rings, is the trachea. And those tiny, tiny airbags with incredibly thin membranes where the actual gas exchange takes place, those are the alveoli. But I really want you to pay special attention to the diaphragm, students. It's this dome-shaped muscle sitting right beneath your lungs. When it contracts, it pulls down, which increases the space in your chest to literally pull air in. And when it relaxes and expands, it moves back up to push that air out. It's like a natural pump. Okay, mark my words, this right here is a VVIP exam question. The exact passage of inhaled air. You absolutely must memorize this flow in order. The air goes into your nostrils and nasal cavity, travels down the larynx, into the trachea, which then splits into the bronchia, traveling further into the smaller bronchioles, and finally reaching those tiny alveoli. I highly recommend drawing a big box around this list in your notes. And you know what's great? Exhalation is simply the exact reverse path. Super easy to remember, right? Carbon dioxide diffuses from your blood right into the alveoli and then gets pushed back out through the bronchioles into the bronchi, up the trachea, past the larynx, through the nasal cavity, and right out of your nostrils into the room. Now, the really crucial point here is what happens to that fresh oxygen once it reaches the alveoli? It actually enters your blood capillaries and forms something called oxyhemoglobin. Just look at the name, it tells you exactly what it is. Oxygen combining with hemoglobin, which is the red pigment in your blood. Your bloodstream then acts exactly like a delivery service, transporting this oxyhemoglobin to every single cell in your entire body so they can perform respiration. Let's jump into section 3, how other organisms respire. Now, when it comes to plants, never, ever forget the stomata. These are the tiny little pores found mostly on the underside of leaves, which help plants to respire. But here is a fascinating fact. A plant's roots also need to respire. They need to produce the energy required to actively absorb vital minerals from the soil. They do this by taking in the oxygen that's trapped in the tiny spaces between soil particles. And honestly, this is exactly why farmers spend so much time plowing the soil, to loosen it up and increase that root respiration. It's just a brilliantly designed natural system. Now for your objective type questions. You definitely want to memorize these animal examples. Very simple single-celled organisms like the amoeba, they just rely on basic diffusion directly from the surrounding water. Earthworms and leeches, they actually breathe using their moist skin. Insects like the grasshopper or cockroach, they use a tracheal system with tiny openings called spiracles. Aquatic animals like fish and crabs use gills, which are basically slits made of capillary-rich filaments designed to extract dissolved oxygen from the water.
And a very special note on amphibians like frogs and salamanders, they are amazing because they are double threats. They use their lungs when they're hopping on land, but can also breathe straight through their moist skin when they're in the water.
All right, on to section 4, aerobic versus anaerobic respiration. I want you to take a mental screenshot of this table right now. This is a classic differentiate between long answer question for your exams. Lock these differences in. Aerobic respiration happens in the presence of oxygen. It is highly efficient, meaning it releases a lot of energy, and its end products are carbon dioxide and water. And this occurs in most plants and animals. Anaerobic respiration, on the other hand, happens in the complete absence of oxygen. It is much less efficient, and its end products are carbon dioxide plus either ethyl alcohol or lactic acid. This type happens in microorganisms like yeast and bacteria, and guess what? It even happens in your very own human muscles during heavy, intense exercise. Know these points inside and out, and those 5 marks are completely secured.
And a pro tip from your teacher, always write down the chemical equations to support your answer. It proves to the examiner that you truly understand the underlying chemistry. The aerobic equation is sugar plus oxygen gives energy plus carbon dioxide plus water. The anaerobic equation is sugar gives energy plus carbon dioxide plus ethyl alcohol. Notice the big difference in the end products there.
And finally, section 5, proof. Oxygen is essential.
You know, in science, we don't just take things for granted, we prove them. So here are the materials for our virtual lab experiment to prove once and for all that oxygen is required for aerobic respiration. We are going to need some beakers, a test tube, a U-shaped glass tube, some colored water so we can see what's happening, a wire mesh, a handful of germinating peas, and some soda lime. The germinating peas are alive, right? So they will be doing the respiring. And the soda lime, well, that plays a very tricky, vital role in this setup, which you are going to see in just a second.
Okay, let's set up the apparatus. First, we drop the soda lime right at the bottom of the test tube. Then we fix the wire mesh a little bit above it and place those germinating peas on top of the mesh. Now it's very important that the peas do not touch the soda lime directly. Next, we connect our U-shaped tube to a beaker of the colored water. We place the whole setup in a water bath to control the temperature so it doesn't mess with our outcome, and then we wait and we observe.
So what do we actually observe after a while? The colored water literally starts moving upwards in that narrow tube. But why on earth does this happen? Well, here is your scientific inference. The soda lime acts as a powerful absorber. It completely removes any carbon dioxide from the air inside the closed tube. As the peas respire, they are actively using up the oxygen. Because the carbon dioxide they breathe out is instantly absorbed by the soda lime, a literal vacuum is created inside the tube, and this vacuum is what pulls that colored liquid up. The conclusion is undeniable, my students. Oxygen is absolutely required for aerobic respiration.
My dear students, we have successfully covered every single crucial detail of biological respiration from your 7th standard syllabus today. You've got the definitions, the human anatomy, the chemical equations, and the absolute proof. I strongly encourage you to use this explainer as your ultimate study companion. Please come back and listen to my teachings anytime, again and again, until you know it all completely by heart to guarantee your success in the exam hall. But before I leave you today, I want you to think about this little puzzle. If anaerobic respiration produces lactic acid in our muscles during heavy exercise, what exactly happens to that acid once we finally stop running and catch our breath? Study hard, think deep, and I will see you in our very next lesson.